Welcome, it's Jennifer. Now normally I do really technique heavy videos, but today I wanted to show you a way to stretch your stamps and get more from your sentiments. Now this is kind of inspired by the Stretch Your Stamps 2 class that's going on over at Online Card Classes. I've linked below and here up in the corner of this video. We're showing you ways you can stretch your stamps and get more from them. Today I'm going to take a bunch of different sentiment stamps and make a bunch of cards that can be personalized. I made most of these for teachers, but I'll show you other ways you can personalize it. And they're super fun to do, and you can use what you already have. To get started, I went through my sentiment stamps and I picked out ones that I thought all kind of had a "you're great" kind of feel to it. So I'm going to make this background and assemble it together and leave a spot where I can put a person's name or teacher or whatever. So you see that little empty spot. I stamped a bunch of sentiments randomly along the background to kind of plan out where I wanted them to go. So this is like my cheat sheet. Let me show you real quick where all these sentiments came from. The U Rule came from this new teacher set from Simon Says Stamp. I also used this great new one from Little Inker Designs. I love the sentiments in this stamp set, and I also like that it's a narrow font. So I got Awesome, You Rock, and You're So Nice from this one. I'll be using this stamp set a lot. Another great stamp set is this one from Technique Tuesday. I love the sentiment, "You are pretty much the best ever." So that's going to be kind of my highlighted one along the bottom. I also use I Like You from that set. And then from this Hero Arts one, this has a lot that would be great on this. I used the You're One in a Million sentiment. From My Favorite Things, I just stamped the small World's Best along the bottom. So now that I've just stamped that cheat sheet in the back, I'm going to take all of the individual sentiments and line them up right over the stamped image. So I'm using it as a guide. So now that I have all my sentiments lined up over it, I'm going to take my stamp press. This is from Fiskars. It's got these little feet that are great to help with stamping. You'll see in a moment. I'm going to press this down and transfer all of the stamps onto the block. If you don't have this stamp press, you could just use a large acrylic block or a plastic plate for this. So I've transferred all the stamps onto my acrylic block here, or my stamp press, and they're all in the perfect position to stamp this over and over on lots of cards. So using the cheat sheet really saves me a lot of time. This is a great way to get more from your sentiments, create a background with a mix of them from different sets. Now I'm putting a stamp pad under my paper here just to make sure that I get really good stamped images. I think you could skip that if you wanted to. This stamp press has some give to it, so it helps you really press down on all these sentiments. You want to push really hard so that you can be sure that you get all the ink from the stamps onto the paper. And there we go. We have all of our sentiments in the perfect place. So now I can clean this off and go on to my next card. I did a variety of colors here. I ended up with 9 cards in total, and I'll show you at the end of the video all the combinations that I used. So here I'm just using Tide Pull and stamping that. Again, you could probably skip the stamp pad and just press firmly with your hands. You just want to make sure that you get all of the ink onto the paper. Now I wanted to have one that had some silver sparkle on all the words. So I have my favorite silver glitter embossing powder. Put it over a coffee filter so I don't make too much of a mess. And I'm going to spoon some of it on to my background here. I stamped these sentiments with Versamark ink, so it's holding onto the embossing powder. Then I'm going to go ahead and heat set this. Now you'll notice the word "the" in the sentiment, "You are pretty much the best ever," didn't completely stamp. So one of the tricks I do here is I either use a Versamark pen to fill that in, or if you work quickly you can use a white gel pen, and that gel will hold on long enough, or that wet ink will hold on long enough to stay wet long enough to hold on some embossing powder, and then you can heat it. And I fixed that sentiment. No need to start over. And I can just fold my coffee filter up and put my embossing powder back into the jar very easily. It's a great trick. So now that I've created lots of backgrounds that have just one color, I wanted to create one where the sentiments were all different colors. So we're going to have a variety of cards here. To do this, I am just going to follow the guide that I created, which you see over on the left, and I'm just going to go through and stamp each sentiment individually. It helps that I have the cheat sheet. This doesn't take as long. I'm actually going to make 3 of these at once, and you'll see that it goes pretty quickly. Now I'm starting with this sentiment that'll be right under the die cut word that we'll add a little bit later. And I'm just lining it up with my cheat sheet that's over there on the left. So I'm just going to go ahead and work my way down on each of these. So I stamp all the sentiments that are below this one on each of the cards. So I'm doing 3 at once. The red ink here I'm using is one I haven't used in a while. It's the Punch ink from Hero Arts. I really like this red. Now, after I've done all the sentiments on the bottom, I'm going to start at the top and work my way down for the rest of them. And I'll just go through and do a mix of colors so that I have 3 cards that will have a variety of colors in the background. So let me show you the backgrounds I ended up with. A solid green hills, a solid sunshine ink, a solid smoke ink. Then the next one, I love that smoke by the way, this is Tide Pool, this is Bubblegum, and then we have the silver embossed one that has the glitter in it, which I think is also quite fun. And then we have 3 of the multicolor. And I'll have links to all these inks below in my YouTube description and over on my blog. Okay, so now it's time to do the die cuts. I wanted to add a die cut word in between that little area where we left in the sentiments. I have these new die cuts from Simon Says Stamp. They say teacher. I am a big fan of doing teacher cards. For all of our teachers, for teachers from the past, I think teachers need to be spoiled. I also thought it'd be fun to put the word you on a card. I decided not to use that in the end, but it's an option. And then I'm going to stamp a bunch or die cut a bunch of letters so I can personalize one with my brother's name. If you don't have dies that have all these words on it or letter dies, you could also use letter stickers. You could use stamps, anything you want in that open area. But you want to do something to kind of make it stand out from all the other sentiments. So I'm actually going to cover these with some clear embossing. So what I've done is I've taken a strip of scrap cardstock, I've covered it with adhesive, and I'm holding all my little die cuts on here. They're all delicate. We're going to give it a little oomph. So I'm pressing Versamark ink over all of the die cut pieces. We're going to add clear embossing powder to this. I've done this in a video before, but I love this technique. Since all of the die cuts are covered with this sticky Versamark ink, I can just add some clear embossing powder to it and it'll stay. Now some of the powder will get on that scrap paper behind it, but that scrap paper is just kind of a holding place for me so I can hold it as I heat each of these. I don't want to burn my fingers, and sometimes delicate dies are kind of hard to emboss. So by having this scrap piece of paper, it really helps. You could also just glue it to a scrap full piece of paper if you wanted to. I think the strips are just easier. So now that I've heat set all of those, I actually want to put another layer of clear embossing on it. So I end up doing 3 layers of clear embossing on each of the die cuts. It's very easy to do. All you do is squish some Versamark ink on, put on the embossing powder, heat it, let it cool, and do it again and again. So you do it 3 times, and that gives you a nice clear like dome look to each of these. It gives it lots of dimension and it looks fantastic. You could stop at 1, but I promise you that the 3 really is worth it. Look how great that looks. If you want to make it thicker, you could add die cut some more of the same shape and layer them on each other, but really I think this is enough. This one here, I did 3 coats of that silver embossing powder with the glitter in it. I think that's fantastic. And then these I started with colored cardstock and then put clear embossing powder on it. So this is a great way to get more from your dies. So now it's time to add these little intricate dies onto our card. So what I'm doing is taking some matte multi-medium from Ranger. It's my favorite liquid adhesive. I'm going to smear some on with my fingers onto the back of this die cut. So I'm just kind of dabbing it on. A little goes a long way with this stuff. The nice thing about this adhesive, it dries matte. So even if it kind of oozes out the side, you don't have to worry about seeing it. I'm using my clamping scissors here, or I'm sorry, tweezers. I love these to help kind of hold this as we do this and put it in place. If any of the adhesive kind of squirts out the sides, you can dab it off with a cloth, and then you just want to press it flat for a few seconds till it dries. Now I went ahead and put a die cut onto each of the cards, just the same way that I showed you. Most of them say teacher, one of them says Mike. I thought it'd be fun to personalize one. This card would be a fun one to make a bunch of and leave that center blank, and then you could personalize with letter stickers, letter stamps, or letter die cuts for whoever needs a card at that time. Now that we have personalized each of the cards, it's time to embellish the stamped panel, and I decided to go with stars. Now on some of the cards I stamped the stars, and on some of them I die cut the stars. Let's first look at the stamping. I used some star stamps from this Lots of Stars stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. That's a mouthful. Anyways, if you don't have this stamp set, a lot of stamp sets have tiny little icons, little hearts or stars or dots or whatever. You could use those tiny images for this instead. Now obviously stamping the stars saves quite a bit of time, so if you want to make these cards quickly, you can just stamp these stars and you can call the stamp panel done. But I also liked the option of doing some die cut stars. So here's what the stamping looks like, but the die cutting, I think it looks much better. So what I did was die cut some stars and put on 3 layers of clear embossing, just like we did on those word die cuts. And I think it all ties together quite nicely. I used this die from Simon Says Stamp that does a bunch of stars, but you could use punch stars if you wanted to. And here you can see how the stars match nicely with the teacher word die cut. You can emboss the stars all at once, so do a bunch of stars at once to save some time. We have now finished our stamped panel, so now it's time to do the note card. And if you look at the edge of this note card where there's black, you can see there's some embossing on it, which ties it in with the embossing we've already done. So I have a black note card here and a diagonal stripe stamp from My Favorite Things. I'm inking it up with Versamark ink and just stamping it along the edge because everything else will be covered. So I just need it along the edge. And now I'm adding some clear embossing powder. Now this clear embossing on the black note card will tie in with the embossing on our card and really creates kind of a finished look. You could skip this if you want to, but I love that tone-on-tone embossing along the edge of the note card. So now I can just glue my panel onto it. I did trim my panel down a little bit, so it's a little narrow, so it's now 4 inches wide. And then I have my card. However, I wanted a pop of red in here. Sometimes I just don't know when to stop, but I wanted a pop of red, so I cut a super thin strip of red scrap cardstock, put some adhesive on it, on the back of it, rub the edges to get any adhesive from the sides off of it, and then stick it onto my card. And I think that gives it a nice finished look. Now I went and I did this with all the cards. I did the diagonal embossing on the side of all the note cards, and I put a thin little strip on the side of all the note cards too. Sometimes those finishing touches make a big difference. So let's look at all the finished cards. On some of them I did a gray note card in the background. For all of the die cut stars I just used some scraps that I had and covered them with clear embossing. Now you can see here I did this silver embossing with the glitter in it on the stars. That really pops nicely. Here I did a fun color combination that I thought was perfect for teachers with that silver embossed background. Now you can tell that these cards kind of come together well because I mass produced them. I created the fast background with a mix of sentiments. Then I used some die cutting and stamping to just kind of finish everything off in a quick way. I think this is a great way to personalize cards and get more from your sentiments. And again, you could go through and make maybe 10 cards where you leave the name off of it, just leave that open area, and the next time you need a card for somebody, you could personalize it with letter stickers, letter stamps, or letter die cuts. This is a great way to get more from your sentiment stamps and create some fun cards at the same time. All the products that I use are linked below in my YouTube description, as always, to multiple sources, or you can head over to my blog and I'll have a ton more information. I would love if you could give this a thumbs up if you found it helpful, because that lets YouTube know that you like my videos and you want to see more. Thanks so much once again for stopping by.